My dear students, welcome to the history video lessons. Today we will begin with chapter number 2, Kings, Farmers and Towns. The slides are taken from HSS Live. Thank you. Let us begin our chapter. Dear students, the first chapter which we read and understood, it was called the Bronze Age era. But in this chapter, we will switch on to the Iron Age era. In the first chapter, we dwelt upon Indus Valley region. But in this chapter, we will dwell upon the plains of Ganga, river Ganga. Okay, so you can see that there were several developments that took place in India during the long span of 1500 years following the end of Harappan civilization. So we learned in the last chapter how the Harappan civilization came to an end. And afterward we see our history shifts from Indus Valley to Ganga Valley. So Rig Veda was composed along the Indus and its tributaries. Okay, and then we find other important aspects like agricultural settlements emerged in many parts of the subcontinent, emergence of new mode of disposal of the dead like megaliths in central and south India, then emergence of new towns and kingdoms. These are the development. Now in introduction, as you can see in the slide, it is very clearly written, there were several changes in economic and political life between 600 BCE and 600 CE. BCE means before common era and CE means common era. The most important was the emergence of early states, empires and kingdoms. There were other changes as well, like growth in agricultural production, emergence of new towns. Historians tried to understand these changes by using a variety of sources like inscriptions, the engraved writings, texts written on some object, then coins and many other things. This is a complex process and sources do not tell the entire story. So when it comes to the evidences available of the second chapter history, we have the evidences like inscriptions, texts, coins, etc. And the wonderful thing about this time era is that the language, the scripts which were used that time, they have been deciphered, and therefore we know in detail about this era compared to the Harappan era where the scripts are still not deciphered. Now you can see in this slide something written about one gentleman called James Prinsep. Who was he? He was an officer in the Mint Company, the Mint of East India Company. Mint here means coin making company, where the coins are made. Remember, another word for coin is mint. So James Prinsep was an officer, okay, in the Mint of East India Company, and he deciphered Brahmi and Kharoshthi scripts and helped us to know about this period in 1830s. So remember, his contribution is great. He deciphered, he understood the scripts, Brahmi scripts and Kharoshthi scripts. Okay, and that is a great help to us, and he did this job in 1830s. In the scripts he found a mention of a king called Piyadasi, meaning pleasant to behold. Behold means to look upon. Piyadasi. There is a perception that Piyadasi must have been used for King Ashoka, the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya. So who is Piyadasi? There is a perception, an idea that Piyadasi is pointing to King Ashoka, who was one of the renowned Mauryan king. Why the 6th century BCE is called a turning point in early Indian history? Before Common Era. Why it is called 6th century BCE a turning point? Okay. It happened because there were some crucial developments during this time period. Like number one, the increased use of iron. It was the beginning of the Iron Age. Second, development of coinage. In Harappan civilization, we have discovered seals, but not the coins. But in this era, we come across many coins of that time period. Then we find the emergence of early states and cities. Early states here means type of kingdom. Okay, and then cities here means the capital cities of those particular kingdom, or some of the major cities of that particular state or kingdom. And then the most important thing is that during this time period, two religions came into existence, that is Jainism and Buddhism. You can see in the map on the top it is written 16 Mahajanapadas. I just mentioned about states. In place of that English word, let me use the word Mahajanapadas. The smaller one called Janapadas. Mahajanpad or Janpad in Hindi. You can see in this map clearly the 16 Mahajanapadas that rose in power during this time period. So in examination, in map, you may be asked to mention one or two Mahajanapadas. So here is the map. You can practice at your own level. Now, what were the features of Mahajanapadas? The 6th century BC is known for the rise of 16 Mahajanapadas. These states were either ruled by kings or ganas, sangha, means more than one king. When we say rule of king, it means only one. But when several rulers combine together to rule, it is called gana or sangha. Each had its own capital, often fortified. Each ruler had its own capital. Each Janapada had its own capital, which was fortified, means kilabandi. Some states maintained permanent standing armies recruited from the peasantry and regular bureaucracies. Dharma Sutras laid down norms for kings and other people. Functions of the rulers were to collect taxes and tribute from people. Now, factors for the rise of Magadh Janapada. Between the 16th and 4th centuries BCE, Magad became the most powerful Mahajanapada. And in this Mahajanapada, we come across the name of three mighty rulers, Bimbisara, Ajashatru, and Mahapadmananda. Availability of iron enabled the Magadhans to make tools and weapons. Another thing, availability of elephants in forests constituted an important part of the army. Fertile soil provided agricultural productivity. Ganga and its tributaries provided means of cheap and convenient communication. Then location of Patliputra facilitated routes of communication along Ganges. Rajgriha, the old capital of Magda, was located amongst hills. You can see the region of Magda in this map. The Mauryan Empire. The rise of Magad culminated in the emergence of the Mauryan Empire. So whenever in your mind Magadha comes, it directly links with the Mauryan Empire. Chandragupta Maurya is called the founder of this empire, who was the grandfather of Ashoka the Great. Okay, and he extended the control up to Afghanistan and Baluchistan. His grandson Ashoka, the most famous ruler, conquered Kalinga. Variety of sources to reconstruct the history of Mauryan Empire. These are some of the sources here mentioned. Historians have used variety of sources to reconstruct the history of the Mauryan Empire. They are archaeological finds, especially sculpture, and Ashoka's inscriptions on pillars and rocks. Literary sources like Indica account of Megasthenes, Arthashastra of Kautilya, and Buddhist, Jaina and Puranic literature are some of the sources. After reading them, we understand about the Mauryan Empire. Here you can see the picture of Ashoka the Great. Okay, and you can read by your own self that in one of the edict, one of the rock inscription, he mentions that all his subjects, they all are his children. What I desire for my own children, and I desire their welfare and happiness both in this world and the next, that I desire for all man. So through this edict, through this inscription on the stone, he is expressing that he is just like a father and all the subjects are like children, his children. Now, Ashoka propagated his own Dhamma. Dhamma here means own Dharma. Ashoka was the first ruler who inscribed his messages to his people on stones, rocks and pillars. He used the inscriptions to proclaim his principles of Dhamma or Dharma. So he is the first emperor. We do not find any other king or emperor ever writing his messages on the rocks and pillars and installing them all across his kingdom or empire. Ashoka is the one who did this wonderful job. And some of the edicts, some of the concepts of his Dhamma are respect to elders, generosity towards Brahmins and other sects, kindness to slaves and servants, religious tolerance towards other religions. We all know that Ashoka later on accepted Buddhism Before that, he was a Hindu king. But after the war of Kalinga, his heart was totally changed and he gave up war and violence and he followed the teachings of Gautam Buddha. Now, features of Mauryan administration as mentioned in the Ashokan inscriptions. Okay, what type of administration? How was he carrying out his day-to-day governmental work? The Mauryan king was the center of the great administrative system. He enjoyed absolute power. So, it was a monarchy with absolute power, and king was the center of everything. The vast empire was divided into number of provinces or states. The Mauryans had a strong standing army. Five major political centers. We find there were five major political centers: Patliputra, Takshila, Ujjaini, Tosali, and Swarnagri to administer the vast empire. These centers were situated on important long distance trade routes. Communication along both land and riverine routes was vital for the existence of empire. Now, role of subcommittees. Megasthenes in his writing, he writes about these things. He mentions a committee with 6 subcommittees, okay, which were organized for coordinating military activity. They looked after the navy, transport infantry, cavalry, chariots, and elephants. The second committee was to arrange bullock carts to carry equipments, to procure food for the soldiers and fodder for animals, and recruit servants and artisans to look after the soldiers. So, measures of Ashoka to hold his empire. Ashoka tried to hold his empire together by propagating Dhamma. Holding his empire means how to keep it under his control. He did it by propagating his Dhamma. He appointed special officers called Dhamma Mahamatas to spread the message of Dhamma. So, in order to carry out his message, he appointed special officers. They were like missionaries who were carrying the ideas of Dhamma. They were called Dhamma Mahamatas. They were involved in spreading the message of Dhamma. Now, every sunrise also indicates there will be a sunset. In the same way, the Mauryan Empire had its sunrise, but it also set later on, which is called post-Mauryan period. Now, after Mauryan period, let us understand what other rulers came. Who were other rulers? By 2nd century BCE, new chiefdoms and kingdoms emerged in several parts of the subcontinent. Subcontinent here means the Indian subcontinent. Now, who are those chiefdoms or kingdoms? They belong to which dynasties? Here you can find the names like Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas in Tamilakam. Okay, and you learn about them from the Sangam literature. Sangam literature. Several states including Satavahanas and Shakas took advantage from long distance trade. Kushans, 1st century BCE to the 1st century CE, ruled over a vast kingdom extending from Central Asia to northwest India. Their history has been reconstructed from inscriptions, coins, and sculptures. The notions of kinship they wanted to convey are well reflected in their coins and sculptures. Okay, notions here means their ideas. So you find that how historians take the help of inscriptions and coins and sculptures, and this is how they reconstruct the history of that time. Huge statues of Kushan rulers have been found in UP and Afghanistan. This indicates that the Kushans considered themselves godlike. They claimed divine status and adopted the title Devaputra, or son of God. History of the Guptas, 4th century to CE. After Kushans, we find the rule of Guptas, 4th century CE, has been reconstructed from literatures, coins, and inscriptions, including prashastis. Okay, for example, Prayaga Prashasti, Allahabad pillar inscription, composed by Harishena, the court poet of Samudragupta. What did subjects think about their rulers? Subjects here means the people who were under the kings. Historians have tried to understand this by examining stories contained in Jataks written in Pali and Panchatantra. The Jatak story indicates the strained relationship between kings and subjects. Kings demanded high taxes and peasants opposed to this. So once again, let me emphasize how the historian reconstruct the history of that era. For that, they take the help of literatures, coins, inscriptions, and sculptures. Even some old buildings and temples also.